The Gory Days are here to stay, the 80s horror show. Take a stroll down memory's lane, it's time to start the show.
The Gory Days, the Gory Days, the Gory Days,
The Gory Days.
Welcome to the Gory Days, the show where we take a stroll down memory lane to remember our favorite horror movies. American Horror Story 1984 Episode 2 just finished airing for this week, and I'm here with my thoughts. Once again, your host, Kyle Leone, for another week of the Gory Days, where... every other week we talk about a movie from the 80s and beyond, typically in the horror genre. And every week, starting last week, we do American Horror Story Season 9, aka 1984, every day as it comes out the day after. So I'm just going to jump right into it. My first segment, as always, as I've done ever since Episode 1, is and shall always be, what the hell just happened? I'm going to go through really quick and just give what the main big story beats that stood out to me. Essentially, the big things that we learn in this episode is the doctor from last episode in episode 1. There was a scene where we saw the insane asylum, I'm going to call it, had a major breakout due to Mr. Jingles, a.k.a. Benjamin Richter, breaking out. And the way that scene set itself up, I thought she was a detective when she arrived on the scene and was asking, like, okay, what happened? But it turns out that she's the chief of medicine for that asylum that I didn't bother to go back and look up the name of. And her name is Dr. Hopple. She has a first name, I think it's like Rebecca or Rowena or Renona. I'm not sure. Man, I even watched it twice, but I can't remember her name. So we learn it doesn't matter because she dies. We learn that she's the chief of medicine and she's very concerned about making sure that her patient gets back. And before she can do anything about it, she gets killed by none other than Mr. Jingles. And we see that it's Mr. Jingles for sure. Like, it's his face, and he leans down, and it's pretty personal. And he kills her. But anyway, I feel like I just want to skip to this main deal, which is Brooke and Montana. Man, I keep calling her Madison. I don't know why I want to keep calling her Madison. Brooke and Montana kind of confide in each other. There's this moment where Brooke and Montana are sitting in their room while the rest of the gang is having their beers. I was going to say the rest of the guys, but I think that'd still be accurate. I think it's just they're the only two females in the group, and then the other three are dudes, including Trevor, the other four. So yeah, while they're joking around at Where's the Beef, they're watching the Where's the Beef commercial, which I've never seen, but I've heard it referenced enough times. Montana tells Brooke that she understands she's still kind of shaken up about the guy breaking into her apartment and freaking her out. And she says something like, a stranger once grabbed my boob outside of Sam Goody, so I know what it's like. And I can understand where she's coming from. She's trying to be empathic, but it just comes off as glib. Like, yeah, you were groped, and that's real, and that's a really horrible thing that happened to you, and I thought I was going to die. You broke into my home and harassed me in the middle of the night, referring, of course, to the events of the first episode where the Night Stalker, real-world L.A. Horrible person, murderer, serial killer, I can't think of, Richard Ramirez, when he broke into Brooke's room, I guess, gosh, that was like last night. The time of this show is, anyway. Then Brooke gets her moment to confide in Montana back, not just about the Night Stalker, but apparently this event that happened last summer. Oh, man. Brooke was engaged to be married to this guy, Joey, who was like the first guy she ever kissed, her first sweetheart, and he was jealous, but she thought that meant she loved him, and long story short, he thought she was cheating on him with his brother. So he kills his brother right there at the altar and then kills Brooke's dad, before finally killing himself. And Brooke was there, and she kind of like sums it all up and like admitting that no, she never cheated on him. She never had any intention to, but he didn't believe her. And no one ever believes me, is what she says about that. And Montana says, I believe you. And then goes in for a kiss, which is so inappropriate. If you are a good friend out there listening to another person confide in you a horrible, traumatic experience, like literal mental scarring, long-term talk therapy kind of trauma they're telling you about, do not mistake it. I guarantee you it is like 99% not ever a hint for you to lean in for a kiss or to take this relationship to the next level, especially if all you say is like, oh, well, I believe you. And then maybe if they move in for the kiss, and even then you should be like, I don't know, you're emotionally volatile. It's very, I guess it's very 80s. So that's the first big piece of information about these characters that we get, the development of Brooke and her past, specifically with this guy Joey. And then we get the boys' night shower scene. And I know the show's created by Ryan Murphy and somebody else, but Ryan Murphy, who I don't know is famously so, but is homosexual. And so I love to see the fruits of that manifest itself in night shower scenes with all these guys. But it's during this little sequence that someone shuts down the generators. There's so many things that happen in this episode that they want me to believe it's someone doing this, but unless they show me their face, I never believe anything that's happening is exactly what they want me to believe. So someone shuts off the generators, and that's when last episode, Xavier got a phone call at the gas station that was mysterious and weirdly threatening in a sexual, violent way. And I thought that was going to be like stretched out a little bit longer. I expected Xavier's look to Trevor and that to expand, but no, it's wrapped up second episode when we meet the like skeevy producer, Blake, who has been following Xavier. It sounds like he was trying to get some, money and more business out of him. It seems like it's not a good situation. But we learned that Xavier, at least he says, I'm not gay. And I don't know, that was frankly disappointing to me. It would have been nice to have one character, but maybe he just doesn't know, or maybe he isn't willing to tell this horrible skeevy producer guy how he truly identifies, especially at a time like, anyway. So the next big beat is Brooke, for some reason, goes out to the dock just to, like, brood, and the Night Stalker finds her, just walks up to her and tries to kill her, and for whatever reason, like, misses a couple of times. She starts running off into the night, and the Night Stalker is in pursuit, but he gets, like, intercepted by the hitchhiker, or that's what I've been calling him, but it looks like they gave him a different title in the credits of last week's episode, but I'm calling him the hitchhiker. I called him that last episode, so I'll be consistent. He runs into Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and he says, you're not supposed to be here. And then the Night Stalker takes out his knife, and the hitchhiker says, wait, I don't die here, and gets killed, gets disemboweled, and one of the, like, it's supposed to be visually like gross, but it's like dark, and the entrails that come out of the hitchhiker's gut are weirdly shiny. But I get what they were going for, and it's gross and it's sad. And then he slits his throat. But then, like 10 minutes later, he finds the hitchhiker again, and he's like, "You're not supposed to be here." And Richard Ramirez, Night Stalker, says, how are you still alive? And it's so weird and trippy. And that's the second weird thing, second or third. But the next one, the Night Stalker meets Margaret Booth. And it's such a weird scene. Like, Margaret's tried to hit on him at first. Like, she doesn't know who he is. She puts on some music and gives him, like, some tea that he thinks tastes gross. And he came to her because he recognizes that she's in the biggest house, so she must know something that's going on, if not be in charge. And he's right; it's not a bad idea. And so he's the one that asks her, "Who is this guy that I killed twice? I've killed a lot of people, but this is the only time I've had to do it twice." And Margaret Booth insists that no, this guy's been dead for 14 years. But then she asks him to confide in her, kind of like Montana and Brooke did with each other earlier. But here we get a weird, like, why do we need to humanize the Night Stalker? Like, first of all, we're calling him by his name over and over again, and then we get this extended flashback sequence of the Night Stalker narrating his own past and how he's a product of a couple of seizures and a really mean uncle or cousin that shot his own wife in front of the Night Stalker when he was a kid. And it's just bizarre that it all culminates in Margaret Booth essentially asking this question to say, it's like, whatever you said, whatever the answer is to what's the worst thing that ever happened in your life, her response is going to be, all those things happened so that you could be the man that you are today and could be brought to me. Like, her point is that he has been sent by, whatever fate has destined these two to meet, so that she can basically explain her hidden agenda here. It's something that she talked to Dr. Hopple about in the beginning of this episode, and kind of lightly discussed in the first episode, that she just lays it out here that the way to freedom, the way to get the kind of freedom where you can do whatever you want, is God and trauma. And as long as you can cite your actions to a higher power, whether you're doing God's will or Satan's will in the Night Stalker's case, then you have free reign to do whatever you want. You're just doing the Lord's work, which is just another descent. Like, every step we take into Margaret Booth's religious development just seems to be another nail in the coffin. I look forward to seeing how the religious community kind of reacts to this. It's not for them, obviously. I don't know. It's for everybody. I don't know. Yada, yada, yada. The kids find the dead, yeah, I guess that's something that happened. The producer died. He gets his head, he's peeking in at the night shower. I mean, who can blame him? But he gets his head stabbed in. He's peeking just like in Porky's when they carve like the hole into the side of the shower and look in at the girls' locker room showers. But in this case, it's inverted, in that it's an older gentleman looking through a fence to see some younger men shower off, particularly Trevor and his hog. He's apparently very impressed, but he gets stabbed through the head by who knows. It's implied once again that because his ear is missing, that the Mr. Jingles killed him, but I don't know. I really feel like they're playing fast and loose. There's a shot right before he gets stabbed through the head where we see, stalker POV. And there's, a reciprocal shot where it's a bright blue eye. And I don't remember who in the cast has bright blue eyes, but I don't think it's Mr. Jingles. Anyway, a little bit later, Margaret Booth goes out to, I guess, look for the hitchhiker that, or we've learned that it's a counselor now. A counselor that was at the camp back in 1970. Margaret Booth recognizes him from not just recognizes him, but knows that he's dead. I saw his dead body 14 years ago, something like that. And yet she goes out to look for him and quickly finds him. And she identifies him as Jonas, so we'll be calling him Jonas going forward. But he accepts that he's a ghost kind of quickly, and she gets a couple of funny jokes in. She says, like, "What am I, Dan Aykroyd?" "Yeah, sure." He goes, "Am I a ghost?" "Yeah." And she says, "There's ghosts in the Bible, and you're here, so yeah, ghosts must be real." And that's when we get Jonas's point of view of the 1970s event the 1970 camp killing event, he, from what his little flashback shows us, he saw a young Margaret Booth covered in blood, standing unharmed, it seemed, in the middle of the room that all of the campers, including, from what she said before, including Margaret Booth herself. And yet this flashback contradicts that. So I don't know what's true. And not only that, he ran away back in 1970 and was also hit by a truck in the same way that he was in episode 1 by our gang. And then, once again, we don't see his face, but we do hear the jingles. He comes out of the truck, and it's Mr. Jingles came out of the truck. So there's some long-reaching implication here that Margaret Booth killed the cabin back in the 70s, and Mr. Jingles had nothing to do with it. He only killed the now what we're calling Jonas. I don't know about that, but that's certainly the info we get. And then I guess she just leaves him there because we see it's the gang having van problems. They all meet up together at the dead producer's body, and decide they need to get out of here. So they get into a van and they drive away for a little bit, but then Rita's there because Rita got snuck behind it up in she got snuck up on in the infirmary by, once again, we can assume it was Mr. Jingles. No. That one definitely was Mr. Jingles, because we did see the top of his head, his balding head, and his long wispy hair on the side. So that was definitely him. But still, there's lots of moments. And the van breaks, so the gang splits into two groups. We've got group 1, who's going to the cabins to get a key to Trevor's Ninja, which is a badass motorcycle. I assume he can take one person on that. But that group is Xavier, Montana, and Trevor, who are all going to the cabin to get a motorcycle key to get out of here. The second group is going to the infirmary to get Rita's car, which is just a rabbit, which I don't know is a type of car or just an expression for a small car, but either way, it's a small car. She says it's not going to fit everybody. So that gang going to the infirmary to get the car keys is Brooke, Ray, Chet, and Rita. And so the episode ends with our two groups split across the camp. It's hard to tell how far away the things are in this camp, but anyway, the two groups are split up and both of their doors are being banged on. And I'm pretty sure Mr. Jingles is the one banging on the cabin door with Xavier, Trevor, and Montana, while banging on the infirmary door is the Night Stalker because of the way they shot some things. But once again, I don't trust anything I see, and it's starting to get exhausting to doubt everything that they show me. But that's where the episode ends. I jumped around. I skipped a couple of things, but for the sake of anyone who watched the episode or still plans on it, I left some things out. So let's move on to our second segment. Well, I guess hidden within that last segment of what the hell just happened was end status we've got Xavier, Trevor, Montana in the cabin, and at the time Xavier is freaking out because he thinks he's finally having a panic attack or whatever you want to call it, thinking that this is my fault. I dragged everybody here, but it's also my fault. I brought the producer here, and now he's dead. And yeah, I guess that is kind of your fault. The producer, there's a line that the producer says, if you're planning on running away, don't have your paychecks forwarded to the aerobic studio that you work at. I don't know. But yeah, and then he says, you're as pretty as you are stupid, and you're very, very pretty. So moving on to our next segment, which I'm going to affectionately call Theory Canal, where I talk about some of the theories that got resolved from last episode and some of my new theories that have become developed as a result of this episode. So starting with last episode, I theorized that Trevor and Xavier had a past simply because of one shot of him looking away. I don't remember, but it had me convinced that it was worth writing down. And it looks like maybe that's not the case, unless they're playing fast and loose with. Unless they're trying to trick me. It's an emotional roller coaster. But as far as right now, I'm going to say that's done. I don't think Trevor and Xavier are going to have a thing. I don't. Trevor seems pretty. He seems pretty into the ladies. The other theory from last week I had involved having the hitchhiker actually be alive since he disappeared from the back of the door that Brooke saw him hanging on. I'm going to go with, let's see, what are the Mythbusters one? There's confirmed, plausible, and busted. So I'm going to go with confirmed on this one. Well, no, I guess plausible because he's not really alive. But yeah, he's not alive at all. He's a ghost. So never mind, busted on that one. But those are the only two theories from last week. The theory that I've developed this week is, I think I've already hit on it a few times, but it's that someone is killing, pretending to be Mr. Jingles. Now, it's already been established that Margaret Booth's keys are enough to trick some of the campers into thinking that it's Mr. Jingles walking around, but then it turns out that it's just her taking her keys out to open the door to her cabin. So there's something there that makes me think maybe Margaret Booth is, maybe they're doing one of those hide and seek. If you haven't seen Hide and Seek, I'm about to spoil Hide and Seek for you. Hide and Seek was, I think, a 2005 horror movie with Dakota Fanning and Robert De Niro. And the whole movie, Robert De Niro is trying to just care for his daughter, Dakota Fanning, and she's having these nightmares about her imaginary friend, and then things are happening that like, oh, is the imaginary friend imaginary or is it real? And here's the big twist. Robert De Niro is Dakota Fanning's imaginary friend, and he is like causing these nightmarish things and ruining regular Robert De Niro's life, not the actor, but the character within the movie. Or you can make an argument that he did, because that movie did not do very well. But the reason I bring that up is maybe they're playing something like that where Margaret Booth doesn't know that she's Mr. Jingles, or at least like a part of Mr. Jingles. I don't know, but or maybe she's just also doing it. Maybe she's trying. I mean, the thing that she says about freedom equals God and trauma. That experiencing trauma and then accepting God gives you freedom to do whatever you want, I feel like is a big gimme as far as thinking Margaret is the killer, or at least one of the killers. But God, we already have two killers running around. There's a lot of killers. Which brings me to my next segment, Kills, Kills, Kills. I don't know if I'm going to keep these names, but they make me laugh, and maybe that's all that matters. So in this episode, we can establish that people that die, I guess, at Camp Redwood, Jonas comes back. So who's to say that the people that die on Camp Redwood that from last episode and this episode won't come back? Who's to say that, let's see, well, yeah, the hitchhiker was the only, or Jonas was the only character from last episode, but who's to say that all of the cabin kids and counselors from that night won't come back in some way? Or even Dr. Hopple, who dies in this, or the gay producer Blake, or the hitchhiker for a third or fourth time. How many times is he going to come back? And why doesn't he remember each time? And will that come into play? Will we get a whole episode devoted to his perspective? Who knows? And then finally, my last segment that I have here is one that I call Mystery LLC, where I have a lot of questions that got dredged up at the end of this episode that still aren't answered from last week's and were raised this episode that aren't answered. And so I'll just go one by one. Whose body is that floated by Brooke when the Night Stalker surprises her at the dock? I can't. So the only people that have died at that point are the mechanic, but we saw that being covered on the news. So unless there was a throwaway line about the body not being found, I'm not sure about that. The hitchhiker, Jonas, who obviously comes back, and the orderly from the hospital. So none of those really tie to Richard Ramirez or the Night Stalker or where he was. So I have no idea who floated by Brooke there. If anybody knows, please tell me, because it's going to keep me up at night. The big question, of course, is how the hell is Jonas a ghost? And does that mean there are other ghosts? And is he a ghost, or is he like a reflection? Constantly, I don't know. Is the ground of Camp Redwood haunted, or is there a curse or something? I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. I didn't expect to have this much intrigue. It's been a while since I've watched an American Horror Story show, or even any dramatic, written, scripted weekly show like this, but it's fun. My next question is, did Margaret Booth kill the cabin in 1970? I feel like I already touched on that, so I can't wait to see if that question gets answered. Who killed the gay producer Blake? I realize that the ear got taken, but that bright blue eye has me perplexed. And finally, why are we humanizing the Night Stalker? I sincerely hope that I expected him to get killed like almost just as quickly, but I guess it makes sense to have the audience asking as many questions as possible, even if the questions are redundant, like, oh, who's killing the people? It doesn't matter. They're both horrible, evil people, but there's a something in the promo for next week's episode, the tag at the end of this one, that God makes me think that they're going to go down this hole that I really don't want them to go down. It's a really tough line, but of saying, oh, some people are made into serial killing monsters, and some people are just born evil. Some people are just pure evil, and I don't know how. I don't know how they're going to wrap that up or how they're going to address that. But right now, the way that they're talking about it has me feeling weird. I don't like to. I'm trying to figure out where I fall on that spectrum of. I'm trying to figure out how I feel. Are people born inherently evil? Are certain people just born, or is every person worth a shot? Is every person, no matter how evil their past has been, are they worth rehabilitating? It's something Batman wrestles with constantly. And I don't know. Maybe it's not for us to decide. Maybe that's for higher powers. But it seems like the Doctor at least is going to show up again in flashback, if not, more ghost form. But her little comment about people being born evil it just rubs me the wrong way. But that's the last question I had from Mystery LLC. And that's about it. I've covered everything that I wanted to here. I got through all of my segments. That wasn't so bad. Next week, next week we'll only be having an episode of American Horror Story. It'll be season 9, episode 3. Until then, and then after that, we'll have another episode. I believe we'll be doing another good horror movie from a more recent era, but otherwise, thanks for spending your time here on the Gory Days. If you want to tell me what you thought of last night's episode, or give me some better names for these segments, you can tweet or Instagram, or basically reach out on all social media at The Gory Days, or you can check out thegorydays.com, or you can even send me an email at thegorydayspodcast@gmail.com. That's 3+ ways to get in touch with me and help me improve this thing that I've set out on. It's only going to be 10 episodes of this, so 8 more to go after this, but I'm still happy to hear all your thoughts on everything else that's coming out down the pike. Until then, stay scary out there.
The Gory Days.